I'll start recording what I'm saying. So the whole idea of this Christian Living Unit is to ensure that people who are training as leaders in churches are able to have a balanced, healthy spiritual lifestyle. And because there are pressures, lots of things that happen. The most extreme would be one we saw the other day over in the US, where one of the that fellow was killed. One of the really tragic things about that, as well as what makes a lot of people incredibly angry, is it was the bloke was actually leading a number of programs with disadvantaged youth with his church, and his pastor and the other leaders in his congregation are really having difficulty coping. Number one, with him being killed, and also with all the rioting that's going on as well. But even when you don't have that extreme, there's always constant pressure on people to take time away from the things which actually sustain us as Christians. And this is what this book's about. So the usual thing, and if you haven't come across this before, so we have the front cover, that's this page here, and the things that you need to look at. We always need to get your name and whatever on it, and I think this year we're going to worry about your start date. There'll be a version number on each book that you get. When we're talking to you, particularly over the phone, we need to know which book you're in and which version you're using, because the page numbering does change from version to version. And then the second page, when you get it back, this is the page that the person marking it will look at. Now, that'll be really easy for you, Donna and Marina, because Judy's able to mark your stuff.
Yeah.
So you'll know immediately. We just need to get a copy of that. So, Claire, I'll let you know what's happening with those ones you've already sent in. I've just had a quick flick, and I think it's going to be okay. It's just my last week or so has been so busy, and the next week could be even busier for me. One of the things that I'm anticipating is that I might actually be called away for a family funeral, and I can actually travel freely at the moment, even if the funeral can only be 20 people. So when you get it back, there'll be marks put into this section here, and the mark will either be competent or you haven't got there yet, not yet competent. So we don't go on a grading system, so it's no pass distinction, high distinction. It's either you can do it or you can't yet. And if you can't yet, you just keep going until you can. You get the idea? That's how all of our stuff works. Quite often when we're doing it, we'll have a C on the front cover as well when you get it back. Now, most of the books will have these couple of pages that look like this. There'll be a little bit about the authors. There'll be a assessment grid. I encourage you, if you're really interested, read it. But I would normally encourage people, don't bother reading this section. This is more for the people doing marking, to let them know what's going on. The contents page will help find things. One of the things we've started doing in the last couple of years is putting a glossary in the front of the book. Some of the words which may not be familiar to people. It depends. For this one, which church you at. This word godparent. For people who go to Church of Christ, Baptist or Pentecostal churches, they won't recognise that as something that gets used. Even in my own tradition, we don't use that a lot, but a lot of people will ask about it. So we give a bit of an explanation of that. Does that make sense? Okay. Because when we designed this book, we were thinking that we would have a number of people who've got a bit of experience. We're asking everybody this year to do the whole book. But what we would normally do is say, okay, we'll ask a few key questions. Do you already have a lot of the skills we're talking about is what we're checking, which is why we have these words in red. So, check back with a trainer. So there's a couple of key questions there which will help us know how experienced you are and how involved you are in church. So you can see that was there on page 8. I go to church once a month, once a week, many times a week. I've helped lead a baptismal service or helped lead communion. We start to know there's a bit of a difference with some of our students. Thinking one of our students last year, she's helped do a whole range of these things. So it was really easy to work her through. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then as we go into the book, and I think what I might do here is just do a quick overview of the book, just to let you know what's going on. So if I look back at so the first one is, how are you going as a disciple? Then we look at, what's required in faith, prayer that underpins disciples' life, how we're nourished through the Bible, and then the ceremonies which we participate in. So there's certainly up towards God, feeding ourselves and then reaching out to other people. There's almost a cross pattern in the middle of that. And so we look at baptism and communion in particular as part of worshipping life. We also look at healing and reconciliation. Now, insert 4, the sacraments unit there, which people who are Catholic, Anglican, Lutheran, it's set up as an elective so that everybody doesn't have to do it. But in that one, we actually look more at reconciliation. In this book, we look at the rituals of healing. And some churches are and some people are fairly used to praying for people who are sick. But we cover what we discover, and what you will discover as you read through it, is that some of these things are fairly common to a whole range of different churches. And then we look at some of the other things. And one of the exercises that we get people to do towards the end of this this book is actually work out a discipleship plan, so that you actually, what are you going to do to actually help encourage your discipleship and your walk with God over the period of a week? And one of the things that I think is really important with that is it's good to have an idea of what you want to do, what you think you ought to do, but then it's also good to reflect on it to find out why it didn't work the way that you'd initially planned. Some people manage it really well, but I get a bit worried at times when students are, I didn't have any problem at all, because I can tell you in my daily devotions, I have problems. I thought when I went into ministry initially, I'd have all this extra time to pray. Everything, I can tell you, everything gets in the way of it. I noticed, I think last week, I picked up my daily devotion book and realised I was at least a week behind. I went, I haven't missed that many quiet times, have I? I had. So it's taken a bit of catching up to do that. And it's one of those things, I know, how did I notice it? I was actually finding myself being quite spiritually and emotionally drained. And there's certainly enough going on at the moment to actually to make me emotionally and spiritually drained. So it's good to good to reflect on that, pick it up. So if we flick through the book, so there's a bit of a description there on where our faith comes from. If I just read off the headings, that should give you a bit of an idea. So where does it come from? It obviously comes from the Creator, the Saviour, and being Christians. And there's a few of the questions there are more about responding to some of those ideas. And what does it mean to be a disciple? There's tension between, this is page 11, living the way of the Creator and living in the way of the world, and the things that can actually cause us some issues there. The fact that we're given the Holy Spirit. So one of the things I encourage you to do is just, answer each of the questions as it comes along. You will notice that there are some bits that are marked as assessment tasks. Keep on reminding people you absolutely must get those ones done. If you skip any of those, then I'll guarantee you whoever's marking will be asking you, what's your answer to that question? And most of these in Cert 3 aren't terribly difficult. Don't stress about it too much. Everybody misses a couple. And it's as simple as turning 2 pages instead of 1. But some people will do that, or you'll start to do it and going, oh, I need to think about that, and you get distracted by family or another conversation. So there's also a bit about Christian assurance, the confidence that we have in being in God. That's all fairly straightforward. I don't need to explain that in any great depth, do I? No. Okay.
Rob, the thing is to remind them that the answers for the assessment tasks are somewhere in the text or what in the Bible reading.
Yeah, that would usually be the case in Cert 3. You should be able to find them either in the Bible reading or in the text in that section. One of the things that we've been trying to do, and Judy's actually been doing a lot of this work, is we've been trying to play in English a lot of the books. And there may be 1 or 2 workbooks where you might have to look in the lesson before the current one, but we tried to avoid that. When you get into Cert 4 and diploma later on, then we'll be expecting you to think a bit more about your answers, and the usual sort of response in, say, diploma is we're looking for a paragraph answer, but you know, when we're doing some of the biblical stuff, we're actually wanting you to do teaching, so that you know you go through all the checklist of things that you need to do to make sure you've covered the meaning of the Bible passage you're looking at, and then how you go about sharing it. But this one should be, you know, the stuff that we find, so that the answers to what's a disciple should be in somewhere. Oh, look, there's a clue, probably in that section, if that makes sense. So back there in section 5.
Pardon me. Thank you.
Okay. And because prayer is so important, that's why the whole of this next lesson is on prayer. And a couple of techniques, you know, so why we should pray. One of my favourite books here on the shelf is actually one called Too Busy Not to Pray, which is a good reminder that, and the person who wrote it, the amount of work that he's done in his life, I'm just stunned at. But it is one of those things we absolutely need to do, and for many of us starting out, it's not always easy. And what we've got here is a few little techniques and clues. The one that I usually explain to people is, if you're not sure what to pray, then read the Psalms, because that's pretty much the prayer book of the Bible. And the real eye opener as you work through the Psalms is there are Psalms where, yes, it's all praise to God, that's great. There's Psalms where they're asking God for things, and there's even Psalms when there's this hair tearing and they're going, how long, oh Lord, do I have to suffer? And the fact that God's bigger than us. God's got broad shoulders, and he can handle the occasional rant, or more than the occasional rant, because God knows and the thing is, God knows what's going on inside here. So if you're angry, God knows it. So there's no point trying to hide it. And some of the Psalms actually allow you to do that. But you know, some of the key things that they're talking about, okay, adoration, you know, loving God for who he is, confessing who we are before God, giving thanks, praying for others, and praying for ourselves. And that I think is actually a good pattern for doing prayer. And I've got to, every time I look at this one, I've got to remind myself I need to do, there's always something I've been neglecting, and I need to look at that a bit more carefully. Okay, that's all straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll actually pause the recording when Father Victor jumps in. There's no doubt he'll have a bit of a yarn, and you'll probably want some questions, and he'll be able to give you some ideas about what's actually happening with the college throughout the rest of this year. So the next lesson, lesson 4, talks about what sustains us in our Christian life, which is the Bible. Uh, I think that's a really corny picture, this one here, Bible on dinner plate. But it really needs to be something we absorb day by day. And one of the things I've been doing on Facebook, and I know, Claire, you've been looking at a few of those as well, yeah, that while we've been in this sort of distance mode thing, I've been recording a daily devotion, and I've been getting some good feedback on it. Sometimes when I started the devotional book I was using, I just found every day had heaps of stuff that, even though everything was prepped for that book probably a year or two ago, it just fitted in with where everybody's at the moment, and found it really, really helpful. It's been a bit of a struggle the last couple of weeks, I've got to tell you. They changed the person doing the writing, and there's one or two of them. I'm getting a bit sick of looking at Acts chapter 2. Because that my devotional book, it seems to come up, the same reading comes up at least twice every week for about 4 weeks now. And then, there are other parts of the Bible that are important as well. And one of the other students actually asked the question about, can you do something on the prophets? Because he's actually doing a unit in prophets in diploma, and a lot of churches often don't teach or preach from the prophets or the Old Testament. So it was good to actually try and mix that up a bit for the students here. But, and we do, and it's important because what we've found over the years at the college is time and time again, Indigenous men and women, when they know the story, when they start looking at the stories in the Old Testament, it actually fits into their experience and the experience of the people they know. One of the things I mentioned when I was doing the Introduction to Old Testament was that if I was teaching a class of Anglos, they all get, Old Testament, it's all full of violence and hardship, and you're not sure about it. But every time I've taught a class here at One Top, I don't get those questions. People look at it and go, it's a story of hope to people who are suffering oppression and violence, and they get the hope all the way through. And I've really enjoyed some of the feedback I've got from students over the years. One of the ones that always stood out for me was we one of the first exercises we do in Intro to Old Testament is get people to tell part of the story of Moses. And one of our students a couple of years ago said, "Hey, Moses was stolen generation." I would never have thought of that. And he said the whole people were like that. And he said, no wonder they were so much trouble when they're on the road going to the promised land. You look at my own mob. I thought, wow, he's got it. So we need to spend time in the Word and read it. And there's a bit of input there, if that makes sense. Now, the next lesson introduces the notion of sacraments and as symbols, and I think I'm just going to have to edit something here. I'll have to check. The person who shared part of the story, I'm pretty sure he's now gone to be with the Lord, with the elders. I'll have to double check. I'm not 100% sure. And giving the story of the Brolga, which is, the mother Brolga sustains the chicks and gives us notion of sacramental story. And I don't know, there was one of the uncles early on in the days of the college brought this story to us, and with this explanation of it being sacramental, so it's useful to look at. So we look at it, the sacraments of the church that we talk about. I'm reminded of one of my classmates when I was at college. Her parents moved to a new town, and they thought, no, they didn't like the reputation of the of the government school in that town, so they enrolled her in the local church school. And she said, RE, they had a question on sacraments. She went, I know what that's all about. And she wrote it, and she actually failed exam. Because she only knew 2 out of, it was a Catholic church, it was a Catholic school. So she knew all about communion and baptism, but she didn't know about the other ones. So we do mention those, and we try and pick up some links. What are the symbols that are important? How does that, how baptism relates to initiation in some ways or not? One of the ones that I loved when I taught a unit in Cert 4. One of the students was from up in the Gulf country, and he was describing how his mob had this practice. He brought his wife back to his home country for the first time, and as they crossed the river to go onto his land, one of the things he did was he stopped and he took a scoop full of water and put it on the head as part of the welcoming and saying, my country is now your country. And it was interesting. He saw the connection between that baptism. The irony is that student was actually raised Anglican, but now is Church of Christ. So they don't do baptism like that. They only baptise adults by immersion these days. So initiation. There's a bit of an introduction there to communion, and you'll find one of the ones that's fairly important is this bit here, which I'll probably leave highlighted. Holy Communion, or just simply communion, or the Eucharist, or the Lord's Supper, or the Mass. Different churches will use their own terminology, but it all means that it's all talking about the same thing. They may not do it the same way, but yeah, there's a whole range of things there. So then the next chapter looks at baptism and its meaning. And it's interesting across all the churches, even though we may do baptism differently, all churches actually agree on what it means, even if they don't agree on how it's done, if that makes sense. So I'll ask you a few questions on that, your own experience, what happens in your own church, that sort of stuff. I just love this picture that somebody came up with, and I don't even know who came up with this picture as a way of actually pinning it all together, the various bits and pieces of baptism. I'm sure something's happening with the page formatting there, but we'll work that out later. Now, it depends on who you've got contact with. Marina, Donna, I'm pretty sure Judy can run you through a baptismal service. Judy, is Judy there at the moment?
Yes, I am sitting in the back.
You've got a copy of the service book, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. I'm not sure what you've got access to, Claire. I'm going to work out where my chat option is. Oh, okay, great. Yeah. So you can go through Uniting and Worship. The red or the green book, it doesn't matter, but there will be a description. I've actually got a green one coming on order. Apparently the publisher has them on half price at the moment. So I thought, $45 was pretty good rather than paying $90. But they are fairly expensive things to buy.
We'll read one of those and you can just
Okay.
that's what that's all.
Yep. So I encourage you to go through that. You may have actually attended a baptism, and we'll do this. This happens again also in the chapters on communion and the healing service. But encourage you to actually go through, if you've got access to a service book, you,
Rob, was there an appendices in one of the books?
yeah, I was about
Oh.
to get to that. So if you've got access to your own denomination's order of service, go through it. And the reason I encourage you to do that is you'll quite often find there are some additional comments. The Anglican book I know has some words printed in red, which are called rubrics. That they give some explanation to that. And the Uniting in Worship one has a lot of introductory material at the beginning of it. And it's worth looking at that to find out why certain things are in there. And you'll find that, you know, in the churches that you're part of, they may use all or some parts and not others. And it's good to do that. So that's part of what this is about. And I think that might be Father Victor joining us. So it's a similar deal when we go through the chapters on communion. There's one lesson there on the meaning of communion, and then the next lesson, and it will ask you somewhere in there, I think. There's, you know, this one here beside this thing on page 32. That you've actually gone through the service. Now, for people who don't have access to a service book, one of the things that was prepared when this unit was originally prepared was Father Rob Greenup and Ralph Madigan from the Catholic Church in Mareeba, who are part of Indigenous connections with the Catholic Church. They included the Roman Catholic Order of Services, and we've got them attached as an appendix. It's also, and even if you're not Catholic, it's good to have a look at it. Because one of the things you'll find is the services are actually remarkably similar. So you find the services have a lot of things in common. So I'm just trying to work out who's come in there. Is that you, Father Victor?
No, it's me, Brendan.
Oh, hi, Brendan. Yeah, we're just working through the new unit for Cert 3.
Work
Okay.
out how to use the audio volume.
Put your, all we can see.
Yeah, the volume is good, but we're looking at your ceiling, mate.
Change it in a sec.
Yeah, but the volume is right this week.
How's that?
Yeah.
That's better.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah. So, Brendan, we have Claire.
You need to sit a bit closer so you can see.
Hello, Claire.
Hang on, I'm just going to pause this for a moment. Stop sharing. Okay, so say hi to Claire. Claire's down in the southeast corner. She can't speak to you at the moment. Her audio's, the microphone's not working. And of course, you'll know who's in the middle there. And
Yes, I know. Honey Judy.
yeah,
Hi, Brendan.
yeah, and we have Marina and
Hello.
Donna.
Hi.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay.
hello, Rob.
Hi. So I'll go back to screen sharing again. We'll just keep doing the overview of this book. That's not what I wanted to share. That'll throw you out.
Yes. We don't have that one.
Because that's actually a paper I'm presenting at a conference next month. Now I'm just trying to find out where it's gone. Where are you?
Still not Brendan.
No, no.
Are you seeing the
Oh,
book yet?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, that looks more like it.
Yeah. Oh, hang on. I know what's going on here. I bet you've got a whole bunch of other things on.
We've got 4 pages.
Yeah, I know what's happening here. Yeah, that's better. Let's do that. Yeah. That makes it a bit tidier because I'd end up sharing my whole screen, which has a bunch of other things on it you don't necessarily want to see. So what I was saying was that, yeah, we go through the meaning of communion. There's a bit of an exercise looking at the different parts of the Bible. And here's Father Victor. Say hi. And again, I think I'll just stop screen sharing so we do some introductions and I'll resume recording. Okay. So we go back to the book. This is one of the things, the program is really good and powerful to do it. One of our other teachers has just joined us, that's Kay Graham. We'll say hi to Kay in a moment, but I thought I'd just work through this. So,
Put a video in it.
okay, so Claire, Donna,
Mm.
Marina, you're clear on what we need to do with this one now?
Yes.
So, and then the next chapter deals with healing and reconciliation. And again, there's a healing service. There is a formal healing service in both the Anglican Prayer Book and the and Uniting in Worship. And you'll find there's the Catholic one at the back, and they're all based on James chapter 5 and laying hands on the sick. So there's a couple of stories there shared by one or two of the elders in the early days of the college, and you get a chance to hear that story and reflect on it. Go through the order of service with somebody, and then just writing that up. Then lesson 9. This is the one I mentioned needs to happen at the beginning. Is that we want you to do a weekly plan, and there's an example plan there on page 40, and then you get a chance on the next couple of pages, 41 and 42. To write up your plan, what you're going to do during the day, whether it's church cleaning, going to worship on Sunday, which you can do in very small numbers at the moment. I was at a Bible study last night, and we're busily trying to work out who's going to be at which church service on Sunday. We're actually, our congregation is running 2 services for 20 people each, but we're live streaming one of them. But the daily devotions, Bible studies, all that sort of stuff. So you write down what you plan to do in this section here. And then at the end of the week, you have a look at how it went. And a lot of people will answer, no, we didn't have any problems, but usually something gets in the way. And I'm just thinking, one of the ladies last year who did this, she planned to do this, and this, and she got to Monday morning and she was called in for the Community Justice Circle, and she spent the next 2 days between the court and the and the hospital. So everything she planned to do didn't happen, and that's okay, because these questions here on page 42 are really important.
Rob, we can't see your screen.
Can't see a screen.
No.
Okay, what's going on here? Let's stop the share.
Yeah. Now we can see it. That's it.
Yep.
Oh, what happened there? Okay, well, that's good. Let me know when things like that happen. We're still learning as we go. It was interesting. I was talking to, I was actually accessing a couple of videos the other day with a group that's working on growing churches in the United Kingdom, and they were finding all of the hassles that we're having. They're having the same ones. So we do it. So the do your plan. The end of the week, work out what went well, what didn't work, and make a note of why. And then these questions are really important. It's we want you to think about what happened and what did you actually try to do too much, or were there good reasons why you couldn't do it? And often there are good reasons. You can have a whole bunch of things planned, but if you get sorry business landed on you in the middle of it, everything else goes out the window. You get no choice. So there's a bit of section there on things that can give you problems, and a couple of questions on that.
Can we to go now? Or? Oh,
Okay, so
I mean, now something specific. No, not really.
so there's a little bit more after that on basically disciple strength. It's about what gives you endurance and the ability to go on. And as I look around this group, I know that a couple of people, if I could get them to talk, they would tell us heaps about what enables them to endure. And then about how we actually share the good news of what Jesus does for us, and how we do that in a way that makes sense to our mob, and not to somebody else's mob, to our mob. And then the fact that we need to live together in community, and that it's as we I've lost the reference in my mind. As iron sharpens iron, so one sharpens another. It might be Ecclesiastes. So we need to actually encourage each other, and then that's the appendices. But if you've done all that, just fill it in. And any questions on that, Marina or Donna or Claire? It's all fairly straightforward.
Yep.
Okay, well that's good. So I'll just stop.